Admiral Zexterra's pristine white uniform drew curious glances from passing humans in the bustling shopping center. The 3-meter-tall Centaurian officer stood rigidly, all 4 arms clasped behind their back in perfect military posture, while their delegation of junior officers huddled nearby, mandibles clicking in hushed conversation. This was not part of the planned itinerary. They were supposed to be touring Earth's prestigious Solar Defense Academy, not wandering through what humans called a mall. However, their transport had experienced an unexpected maintenance delay, and their human liaison had suggested this detour rather than waiting in the station. Fascinating primitive architecture, Lieutenant Kurtal observed, their antennae twitching as they studied the glass domed ceiling. Though I suppose it serves its purpose for their level of development. Admiral Zexterra didn't respond immediately. Their attention had been caught by something else. A gathering of human children pressed against a storefront window. Under normal circumstances, the Admiral would have dismissed such a scene. Young ones were the same across the galaxy, easily distracted by bright colors and moving lights. But these children were different. They weren't simply staring at the display. They were analyzing it. Power management is critical during first contact scenarios. A small human with braided hair was explaining to her companions. If you divert too much to weapons, you might be seen as hostile, but too much to shields, and they might think you're afraid of them. Yeah, but what if they're Keplerian raiders? Another child argued. You need those shields up fast or... Excuse me, Admiral Zexterra interrupted, their universal translator rendering their clicks and whistles into smooth English. What educational program are you discussing? The children turned, their eyes widening at the sight of the towering alien officer. To their credit, none showed fear, only excitement and curiosity. The braided-haired child stepped forward with a confident smile. It's Starbridge Commander, sir. Or ma'am. Sorry, I'm not familiar with Centaurian honorifics. Admiral is sufficient, Zexterra replied, noting the child's diplomatic instinct to address proper titles. And what is the purpose of this? Starbridge Commander. It's the best space simulator ever, another child chimed in. You get to run your own ship, manage the crew, handle first contact situations, and trade routes, added a third. I made so much credit last week running medical supplies through the Orion corridor. Lieutenant Kurtal shifted uncomfortably. Admiral, we should proceed to the academy. This is clearly some simple entertainment program. Simple? The braided-haired child looked offended. Try managing a cascade failure in your antimatter containment while negotiating safe passage through disputed territory. There's nothing simple about it. Admiral Zexterra's secondary eyes narrowed in interest. The child had used the correct technical terminology for antimatter systems. Not simplified game language, but actual engineering terms. Would you demonstrate this simulation for me? The Admiral requested. The children's faces lit up. They practically dragged the imposing alien officer into the store, past rows of simulation pods and holoprojectors. A human employee rushed over, looking nervous about the sudden arrival of a high-ranking alien delegation in their shop. Welcome to Game Sphere, Admiral, the employee managed. Can I help you with something? These young ones were about to show me their Starship operation skills. Zexterra replied. I find myself curious about their training methods. The employee relaxed slightly. Of course. Sarah, why don't you show the Admiral your high score run on the diplomatic mission track? The braided-haired child, Sarah, grinned and hopped into the nearest simulation pod. The holographic controls sparkled to life around her small hands, and Admiral Zexterra leaned forward, all 4 eyes focused intently on what was about to unfold. After all, how complex could a human child's game possibly be? The simulation pod hummed to life around Sarah, its holoprojectors painting the air with crystalline displays. Admiral Zexterra's antennae twitched as they recognized standard ship diagnostics, power distribution graphs, and what appeared to be a surprisingly accurate representation of local space. Initiating diplomatic scenario. Unexpected first contact, the computer announced. Complexity level. Advanced. Unknown vessel detected at coordinates bearing mark 350. Sarah's fingers danced across the controls with practiced ease. Running passive scans first, she explained to her audience. No point spooking them with active targeting. Lieutenant Kurtal leaned closer to the Admiral. Sir, this is clearly a simplified. Their shield harmonics are fluctuating, Sarah interrupted, her eyes narrowing at the readings. Power signature doesn't match any known configuration in the database. Computer, analyze hull composition. The simulation responded with a detailed metallurgical analysis that made several of the junior officers exchange surprised looks. This was not simplified data. These were real engineering specifications. Interesting approach, Sarah murmured. They're running hot in the mid-bands, but their low-frequency coverage has gaps. Computer, reconfigure our shield emitters to pulse at 1/3 standard frequency. Let's show them we see their weakness without exploiting it. Admiral Zixtera's secondary eyes widened. That was a standard Centaurian greeting protocol, demonstrating tactical awareness while signaling peaceful intent. How did this child know it? Unknown vessel is responding, the computer announced. They are matching shield configurations. Sarah grinned. Good. They understand diplomatic signaling. Now let's try something fun. Her hands moved in a complex pattern across the controls, shifting power distribution to highlight our medical and science labs, while reducing output to weapon systems. Computer, prepare first contact package Alpha 7. The store employee leaned over to the Admiral. She holds the station record for successful first contact scenarios. 23 peaceful resolutions in a row. A warning klaxon suddenly blared through the simulation. Alert. Radiation surge detected. Unknown vessel's power core is destabilizing. What? Lieutenant Kurtal clicked in alarm. This is an impossible scenario. No commander should have to handle first contact and a core breach simultaneously. But Sarah was already moving, rerouting power to forward shields. Computer, broadcast emergency assistance protocols on all frequencies. Calculate safe tractor beam angle accounting for radiation interference. Her small fingers flew across 3 separate control panels. The holographic displays showed complex calculations as she figured out how to project their shields around the failing vessel without compromising either ship. Their core design, she muttered. Wait, computer, magnify power signature analysis. Cross-reference with theoretical models. Her eyes lit up. They're running a modified Kessler drive. The radiation's not from a breach. It's from improperly aligned containment fields. Admiral Zixtera stepped forward involuntarily. The Kessler drive was an experimental Centaurian design that had never been successfully implemented. How could this simulation include transmitting containment field harmonization protocols? Sarah announced. If they sync their fields to match our shield frequency, it should stabilize their core. She looked up at the Admiral with a proud smile. Standard solution for Kessler-type drives. My friend Raj figured it out last week. The simulation chimed pleasantly. First contact successfully established. Unknown vessel's power systems stabilized. They are transmitting gratitude and a request for cultural exchange. Admiral Zixtera's mandibles clicked rapidly as they processed what they'd just witnessed. This human child had not only handled a complex diplomatic scenario, but had also demonstrated knowledge of classified Centaurian technology. And she treated it all like it was simply an engaging puzzle to be solved. Sarah, the Admiral said carefully, how many hours have you spent in this simulation? Oh, loads. She replied cheerfully, powering down the pod. It's my favorite thing to do after school. My whole class competes to see who can handle the toughest scenarios. She hopped out of the pod. Want to try? The Kessler drive scenarios are really tricky, but they're super fun once you get the hang of the field harmonics. The Admiral's junior officers were now huddled together, whispering intensely. Their careful plans for technological superiority had just been upended by a human child who thought their most advanced drive system was a fun afternoon challenge. And somewhere in the back of their mind, Admiral Zixtera began to wonder what other surprises these humans had quietly embedded in their children's games. 2 hours later, Admiral Zixtera stood in the gleaming command center of Earth's Space Force Academy, their earlier encounter with Sarah still processing in their mind. The delegation had finally arrived at their scheduled destination, and Captain Elena Rodriguez was leading them through what should have been a routine tour. "And this is our primary training bridge," Captain Rodriguez announced, gesturing to a sophisticated command center, "where our cadets learn tow." The Admiral's steps faltered. Their secondary eyes dilated in shock, while their primary pair rapidly scanned the layout before them. The helm configuration, the power distribution grid, even the tactical overlay system. It was identical to the game they'd seen at the mall. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Kurtal whispered in Centaurian. "The simulation couldn't have been this accurate." Captain Rodriguez paused, noting their visitor's sudden stillness. "Is everything all right?" "Admiral." "Captain." Zixtera began carefully, all 4 arms clasped tightly behind their back. "These control systems appear remarkably similar to a commercial entertainment product we observed earlier today. Starbridge Commander, I believe it was called." A knowing smile spread across Rodriguez's face. "Ah, you've seen our recruitment tool in action." "Recruitment tool?" The Admiral's antennae twitched in confusion. "Please follow me." Rodriguez led them to a side room filled with historical displays. She brought up a holographic timeline. 50 years ago, Earth's Space Force faced a challenge. Space travel was becoming more complex, requiring officers to master an unprecedented number of skills. Traditional training methods couldn't keep up. She gestured to an old image of children playing what looked like a primitive version of the simulator. Then someone had an idea. What if we started earlier? Not with formal training, but with games that taught the fundamental concepts. Every child who dreams of space naturally gravitates toward these simulators. By the time they reach academy age, they've already logged thousands of hours practicing the basics. But the technical specifications, Lieutenant Kurtal protested. The protocols, the engineering details, surely those are simplified. "Actually," Rodriguez said, pulling up another display, "the Starbridge series uses our actual operational software, just with a more intuitive interface. Those kids aren't playing with toys. They're training on real Starship systems." Admiral Zixtera's mandibles clicked rapidly as the implications sank in. "The Kessler drive scenario. One of our advanced modules," Rodriguez confirmed. "We release new technical challenges as they're developed. The children think they're getting exciting new content updates. In reality, they're helping us test experimental systems and develop novel solutions." She brought up a statistical display. Last year, a 13-year-old in Singapore found a way to increase antimatter containment efficiency by 23% while playing what she thought was just a challenging new level. "We've already implemented her solution across the fleet." The Admiral moved closer to examine the data and the diplomatic scenarios. Real first contact protocols, packaged in an engaging format. We find children are remarkably good at thinking outside traditional diplomatic constraints. They frequently develop creative solutions that our veteran officers might overlook. Lieutenant Kurtal made a sound of distress. "But how do you maintain security? Surely other species could access these games. Learn your capabilities." Rodriguez's smile widened. "They already do. The game is available throughout known space. But here's the brilliant part. Most species dismiss it as simple entertainment, just as you did initially. They never realize they're actually looking at the future of space exploration, hidden in plain sight." She turned to face the Admiral directly. "Tell me, what did you think of young Sarah's performance?" Admiral Zixtera's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as they recalled the child's casual expertise. She handled a complex first contact scenario, while simultaneously solving an engineering crisis that has stumped our best scientists. And she did it all while explaining her process to friends, as if teaching a class. Exactly, Rodriguez nodded. Now imagine an entire generation of officers who've been practicing those skills since childhood, who see complex space operations as an engaging challenge rather than a daunting task. She paused. Would you like to see our cadet training scores compared to traditional methods? The Admiral's antennae drooped slightly. They had a feeling they weren't going to like those numbers, but they needed to see them anyway. In the Academy's historical archives, Admiral Zix Terra sat motionless before a wall of holographic displays. Captain Rodriguez had granted them full access to Earth's training records, and what they found was both fascinating and mildly terrifying. Computer, replay early aviation training sequence, the Admiral commanded. The display shifted to show human children from centuries past, running across grassy fields with arms outstretched, clutching crude paper aircraft. The scene transformed through decades: wooden gliders, primitive flight simulators, early computer games, and finally, the sophisticated Starbridge program. Lieutenant Kurtal hovered nearby, mandibles twitching nervously. Admiral, the High Command won't believe this. Look at the pattern. Zix Terra responded, their four eyes fixed on the shifting images. While we were carefully restricting access to flight knowledge, humans were letting their children experiment freely. They gestured to a clip of young humans stacking blocks to understand structural engineering. They turned learning into entertainment centuries before reaching space. The next sequence showed a classroom from 50 years ago. Children worked in teams, managing simulated crisis scenarios that would challenge even seasoned Centaurian officers. But these humans were laughing, competing, treating complex astronomical calculations like an engaging puzzle. Computer, compare standard Centaurian pilot training with Earth's Starbridge progression, the Admiral requested. Two timelines appeared side by side. The Centaurian track showed 15 years of rigorous academic study before any practical experience. Earth's timeline began with preschoolers playing simple space games, building complexity year by year through natural interest. Fascinating, Zix Terra murmured. By the time human children reach formal training age, they've already internalized concepts our cadets struggle to master. They don't fear failure because it's all been framed as play. The display shifted to show recent statistics. Starbridge players worldwide, 2.3 billion. Average daily active users, 890 million. Problem-solving innovations submitted through gameplay, 12,000 per day. They turned their entire species into a training program, Kurtal whispered, antennae drooping in shock. Not just training, the Admiral corrected, bringing up another file. Look at these social interaction patterns. The game doesn't just teach technical skills. It builds diplomatic intuition, crisis management, resource allocation, ethical decision-making. They paused on footage of children from different countries collaborating on a complex rescue mission, overcoming language barriers through shared understanding of ship operations. They're preparing their young for every aspect of space exploration, and the children don't even realize they're learning. A new alert flashed across the screen. The Admiral opened it to find Sarah's simulator session from earlier, now uploaded to the Academy's database. The analysis showed that her solution to the Kessler drive crisis had already been flagged for further study by Earth's engineering division. Our scientists spent decades trying to solve that containment field issue, Zix Terra said softly. This child found an answer because she didn't know it was supposed to be impossible. She just thought it was fun. The Admiral stood, walking slowly along the timeline display. We've been approaching this all wrong, Lieutenant. We saw human children playing games and assumed their training was inferior. Instead, they've created the most sophisticated educational system in known space, and disguised it so well that we completely missed it. Kurtal's secondary eyes narrowed. But surely their actual military training is built on this foundation, Zix Terra finished. Their formal academy programs don't need to teach basics because those were mastered years ago through play. They can focus entirely on advanced concepts, creative problem-solving, and pushing boundaries. The Admiral turned back to the displays, watching Sarah's simulation play again. No wonder humans adapt so quickly to new situations. They'd been practicing innovation since before they could walk. They clicked their mandibles thoughtfully. The real question is, what do we do with this information? Before Kurtal could respond, a new alert appeared, Captain Rodriguez requesting their presence in the simulation chamber. It seemed the Academy had prepared a demonstration of their advanced training protocols. The Admiral's antennae twitched with anticipation. After what they'd learned, they had a feeling this would be enlightening. The Academy's simulation chamber hummed with anticipation. Word of the impromptu competition had spread quickly, drawing a small crowd of instructors and senior cadets. On one side stood Cadet First Class Jakara, the pride of the Centaurian training program. On the other, 14-year-old Tommy Patel sat cross-legged in his simulator chair, adding details to a doodle of what appeared to be a hybrid Starship design. Admiral Zixtere observed both competitors carefully. Chikara's posture was perfect, their uniform immaculate. Every movement demonstrated the discipline of 15 years of intensive training. Meanwhile, Tommy had just asked Captain Rodriguez if he could have a snack during the simulation. The scenario will be randomly selected, Rodriguez announced, addressing the gathered audience. Neither competitor has prior knowledge of the challenge they'll face. She turned to the control station. Computer, initialize random scenario protocol alpha. The holographic environments materialized around both participants. Tommy straightened up, finally putting away his sketch pad, while Jakara's hands moved to their designated positions with practiced precision. Scenario loading, the computer announced. Parameters set. Solar event crisis combined with civilian emergency response. Beginning in 3, 2, 1. The simulation erupted into action. Warning alerts flashed as a massive solar flare burst from a nearby star, its radiation front racing toward a civilian transport struggling with engine problems. Jakara responded immediately, fingers flying across their console as they pulled up the standard emergency protocols. Computer, calculate safe departure vector accounting for radiation dispersion pattern. Unable to compute, the computer responded. Radiation interference affecting navigational sensors. The Centaurian cadet paused momentarily, scanning their training manuals for the proper procedure. Meanwhile, Tommy was grinning. Oh man, this is just like that level in Starbridge, where you have to rescue the Europan ice miners. He twisted in his chair, bringing up a three-dimensional display of the local space. Computer, can we get a visual on the flare's magnetic field lines? The display shifted, revealing complex patterns of solar energy. While Jakara methodically worked through their emergency checklist, Tommy was already plotting a course that seemed to weave through the very fabric of the storm. What are you attempting? Admiral Zixtere asked, leaning forward with interest. It's basic surfing principles, Tommy replied, as if this explained everything. You don't fight the wave, you ride it. Look at how the magnetic fields are shaping the plasma flow. If we time it right. His fingers danced across the controls, making minute adjustments. We can use the flare's own energy to boost our speed while its magnetic field shields us from the worst of the radiation. Jakara looked up from their manual, mandibles clicking in disbelief. That's not possible. The regulations clearly state. Got it, Tani exclaimed. His ship curved gracefully into position, matching velocity with the solar event itself. Now we can extend our shields around the civilian transport. The combined field strength should hold until we surf out of the danger zone. The assembled Academy staff watched in stunned silence as the 14-year-old executed a rescue maneuver that violated at least 15 standard protocols, and worked perfectly. The civilian ship was safe, and both vessels had emerged from the crisis using minimal power. How did you know that would work? Captain Rodriguez asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. Tommy shrugged. pulling his sketch pad back out. "There was this really tough bonus level last month where you had to save a research station near a pulsar. Me and my friends spent like 3 days figuring out how to use magnetic fields for protection instead of just trying to power through them. After that, this was pretty easy." Chikara stood rigidly by their console, still processing how their years of training had just been outmaneuvered by what amounted to a child's game experience. Admiral Zeke turned to Rodriguez, their 4 eyes blinking in sequence. "Captain, I believe I need to make an urgent call to the Centaurian High Command. We may need to reconsider our approach to pilot training." As they left the simulation chamber, they could hear Tommy asking if anyone wanted to try his new idea for using solar flares to power long-range communications. Behind them, several academy instructors were already gathering around the enthusiastic teenager, datapads in hand. The future of space exploration, it seemed, was being written by children at play. Deep in the Academy's research wing, Admiral Zixtera sat surrounded by neural scanning displays, their antennae twitching as they processed the data before them. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of holographic projectors and the occasional click of their mandibles. "Display comparative brain activity analysis," they commanded. The air filled with colorful three-dimensional representations of neural patterns, human children playing Starbridge alongside seasoned space captains during actual missions. Captain Rodriguez stood nearby, watching as the Admiral absorbed the implications. "Notice anything interesting?" "The patterns are nearly identical," Zixtera responded, 4 eyes widening. "The children's brains are engaging the same decision-making pathways, the same problem-solving centers." They paused, mandibles clicking rapidly. "But their stress responses are significantly lower." "Exactly." Rodriguez brought up another display, a historical timeline of human educational psychology. "We discovered this phenomenon centuries ago, long before we reached the stars. When humans are engaged in play, they learn more efficiently and retain information longer than through formal instruction." The Admiral's secondary eyes narrowed. "But surely there's a difference between genuine crisis response and games." "Computer, display case study 47B," Rodriguez commanded. A new hologram appeared, showing a side-by-side comparison of 2 emergency scenarios. On the left, a real reactor containment failure on the ISS Europa. On the right, a 12-year-old playing through a similar scenario in Starbridge. Zixtera leaned forward, studying the data streams. The solutions were practically identical, but the child had arrived at their answer 3 minutes faster than the professional crew. "How is this possible?" "Fear," Rodriguez explained, highlighting the relevant neural patterns. "Professional crews, despite their training, still feel the weight of potential disaster. Children playing a game don't carry that burden. They're free to think creatively, to try unconventional solutions, because failure just means starting the level over." The Admiral accessed another file, this one showing the incremental difficulty progression of Starbridge scenarios. What appeared to be simple space battles in early levels were actually teaching complex physics concepts. Trade route planning games secretly train children in advanced logistics and resource management. "It's brilliant," Zixtera admitted. "Each game element serves multiple educational purposes, even the social aspects." They gestured to footage of children playing together, sharing strategies, teaching each other new techniques. "You're not just training pilots and engineers. You're developing commanders, diplomats, teachers. The best part," Rodriguez smiled, "they beg us for more training. Every new scenario we release is met with excitement. Children spend their free time mastering skills that most species have to mandate through rigid programs." A new alert flashed across the displays. The latest player statistics from Tommy's innovative solar flare maneuver. Already, thousands of young players worldwide were attempting to replicate and improve upon his technique. "Your children solve problems that have stumped our best scientists," the Admiral noted, "because they don't know these problems are supposed to be impossible." More than that, Rodriguez added, bringing up yet another neural scan. Look at the creativity centers. When our children face a challenge, their first instinct isn't to check regulations or follow procedures. They experiment. They collaborate. They play. Zixterra finished, understanding dawning in all four eyes. You've turned the most serious endeavor in history, space exploration, into the greatest game ever created. The captain nodded. And every day, millions of children voluntarily spend hours mastering the skills they'll need among the stars. They learn to handle complex engineering problems, navigate diplomatic challenges, and manage crew dynamics, all while having fun. Admiral Zixterra's antennae drooped slightly as they considered the implications for their own training programs. How many potential innovations had been lost because Centaurian education focused solely on rigid procedures? Captain, they said finally, I believe I need complete access to your historical education records. The High Command needs to understand not just what you've accomplished, but how you developed this approach. Rodriguez smiled. Of course, Admiral, though I should warn you, some of our most successful training programs began with children throwing paper airplanes. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. They had a feeling the future of Centaurian education was about to become much more playful. The Grand Chamber of the Centaurian High Command felt colder than Admiral Zixterra remembered. 7 Elder Commanders sat in their elevated pods, their collective gaze fixed on the holographic display showing Earth's educational data. The Admiral stood at the center of the chamber, all 4 arms clasped behind their back, waiting for the inevitable resistance. This is absurd, Elder Kavor declared, their ceremonial headpiece trembling with indignation. You suggest we abandon 15 generations of proven training methods in favor of children's entertainment. Not abandon, honored Elder. Zixterra responded carefully. Enhance. The neural scanning data clearly shows. Data gathered from human children, interrupted Elder Marin. Our physiology is different. Our mental processes are unique. Our traditions err. A high-pitched chime interrupted the Elder's speech. All eyes turned to the chamber's grand entrance, where a small Centaurian child had somehow slipped past the guards. It was Ul-Issa, Elder Kavor's grandchild, clutching what appeared to be a personal computing device. Grandfather, Ul-Issa chirped excitedly, mandibles clicking in the way of young ones. I achieved the highest score in the Starbridge Spatial Navigation Challenge. The chamber fell silent. Elder Kavor's antennae drooped in embarrassment. Lissa, this is a formal military proceeding. You cannot simply. Actually, Admiral Zixterra interjected smoothly. This is perfectly relevant. Lissa, would you show us how you solved the navigation challenge? The child bounced forward eagerly, their small hands connecting their device to the chamber's main display. The familiar Starbridge interface appeared, showing a complex asteroid field with shifting gravitational patterns. See, most players try to calculate each asteroid's trajectory individually. Ul-Issa explained, their youthful clicks translated by the chamber systems. But if you treat the entire field as a fluid dynamics problem, their fingers danced across the controls, demonstrating a solution that made several Elder Commanders lean forward in their pods. That's, Elder Marin started, then paused. That's remarkably similar to how space dust behaves in nebula formations. Exactly. Ul-Issa beamed. I learned that from the nebula exploration bonus level last week. If you applied the same principles here, they demonstrated a graceful maneuver through the asteroid field that even the Academy's best pilots would struggle to replicate. Admiral Zixterra watched the Elder's reactions carefully. Lissa, how long have you been playing Starbridge? 3 weeks, the child replied proudly. I'm already better than my teaching pod supervisor at power management sequences. Elder Kavor's secondary eyes widened. 3 weeks. But the basic principles of spatial navigation take years to teach formally, Zixterra finished. But children learn differently when they're playing. They experiment without fear of failure. They share discoveries naturally. They The Admiral was interrupted by another chime as Ulysses' device connected to the Starbridge network. The chamber's displays lit up with messages from other young players, humans, Centaurians, and various other species, all collaborating on new solutions to the asteroid field challenge. "Look," Lissa pointed excitedly. "My friend Sarah from Earth just found an even better way through the field. She's combining the nebula technique with something called solar wind dynamics that I haven't learned yet." The elders watched in stunned silence as children across the galaxy casually exchanged solutions to problems that had puzzled their best scientists. The barriers of species and language meant nothing to these young minds united in play. "Honored elders," Admiral Zixterra said quietly, "we are witnessing the future of galactic cooperation and advancement. These children don't see boundaries between formal education and entertainment, between work and play, between species and cultures. They simply see puzzles to solve and friends to solve them with." Elder Kavor looked down at their grandchild, who was now enthusiastically explaining advanced gravitational concepts they had never been formally taught. "Perhaps," they said slowly, "it is time for us to learn from the young ones." The Admiral's antennae lifted slightly. It wasn't full approval yet, but it was a start. And if there was one thing they had learned from studying human educational methods, it was that the best revolutions began with small steps. And sometimes, they began with a child's game. 5 years later, Admiral Zixterra stood in the observation dome of the newly inaugurated Galactic Youth Space Academy, watching the scene below with all 4 eyes focused intently. The massive chamber hummed with activity as young beings from dozens of species worked together at simulation stations, their excited chatter translated by advanced systems that had once been reserved for high-level diplomatic functions. In one corner, Sarah Chen, now a teaching assistant at 17, guided a group of Centaurian youngsters through an advanced reactor maintenance scenario. Her old friend Ulissa sat nearby, showing human children how to interpret subtle gravitational waves that Centaurian senses could naturally detect. "Quite a change from 5 years ago," Captain Rodriguez commented, joining the Admiral at the viewport. She had recently been promoted to oversee interspecies training coordination, a position that hadn't existed before the Academy's creation. "Indeed," Zixterra replied, watching as Tommy Paddle demonstrated his latest innovation, a way to use solar flares as natural acceleration boosters for long-range probes. The technique, first discovered in a game, had revolutionized deep space exploration. Though I admit, I never expected the elders to embrace change so completely. Rodriguez smiled, gesturing to where Elder Kavor was sitting cross-legged on the floor, completely absorbed in a training simulation with their grandchild. "Sometimes the best way forward is to remember how to play." A cheer erupted from one of the simulation pods. A young Arcturian, using their species' natural ability to process multiple data streams, had just combined human creativity with Centaurian precision to set a new record for emergency response time. "Computer, display current Academy statistics," the Admiral requested. Holographic numbers filled the air before them. 3 million students from 27 species. Over 12,000 innovations submitted for review in the past month alone. First contact success rate, up 42% across all participating cultures. The real breakthrough, Rodriguez noted, was when we stopped trying to make everyone learn the same way. She pointed to different sections of the chamber, where various species were approaching similar problems through their unique perspectives. Now we celebrate those differences. Let each culture's strengths enhance the others. The Admiral's antennae twitched in agreement. Below them, a human child was explaining the concept of surfing to a fascinated group of young Rigelians who were already theorizing how to apply the principle to plasma wave navigation. "To think," Zixterra mused, "all of this started because I happened to see a child playing a game in a shopping center." "Not just playing," a familiar voice corrected. They turned to find Sarah approaching, now wearing the distinctive uniform of an academy instructor in training. "We were learning, exploring, dreaming. We just didn't know we were helping to reshape galactic society while we did it." A soft alert chimed through the chamber. "Attention, students," the computer announced. "New scenario bundle available for testing. Designation: Deep Space Anomaly Response Protocol version 3.0. The excitement in the room was palpable as young minds from across the galaxy eagerly dove into the fresh challenges. The Admiral watched as teams naturally formed across species lines, each bringing their unique perspectives and abilities to bear. "You know what the best part is?" Sarah said, grinning as she prepared to join her students. "It's still just as fun as it was when I was 12. Admiral Zixtera's mandibles clicked in what had become their version of a smile. They watched as their own child, newly enrolled in the Academy's junior program, joined a team of human and Rigelian students tackling the new scenario. "Captain Rodriguez," they said quietly, "I believe we've done more than improve training methods. We've created a generation that doesn't see boundaries between species, between work and play, between learning and living. That's humanity's gift to the galaxy," Rodriguez replied. "We showed everyone that the most serious pursuits in life can also be the most enjoyable." Below them, the chamber continued to buzz with activity, filled with the sound of young voices speaking dozens of languages, but united by the universal language of discovery through play. The future of space exploration wasn't just being written here, it was being played into existence, one joyful innovation at a time.